Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. I'm Catherine Llewellyn. So I met somebody this morning for a pre-call for the podcast. And when he came on, he said, "Can you hear me?" I said, "Yeah, I can hear you, but I can hear some other people as well." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm it's a bit, I'm in a cafe, there's some other noise going on, etc." I said, "Oh, I'm not sure that's going to work. We need to sort of focus and actually have a conversation." He says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was just a pre-call." And I thought this was just a pre-call is a really interesting thing. If you're a podcaster, which I'm guessing most people listening and watching are not, if you're a podcaster, how many times have you heard, "I thought this was just a pre-call"? Now, this is equivalent to someone saying something like, "Oh, I thought this was just a chat," or "I thought this was just a coffee," or "I thought this was just a," and where what they really mean by that is, "I thought this wasn't really important. I thought this didn't really matter. I thought this was just not really a thing, not really significant." And in my case with the show, as you probably know, if you've been tuning in for a while, you know that when we come into the episode, that obviously some work has been done by me and the guest together to get ourselves into the right frame of mind for the episode. And that happens in the prequel. So the prequel does actually matter in a specific technical way for this particular show. And lots of shows don't do it, and lots of shows do it. So in that specific, yeah, it does matter. And actually, I cancelled the prequel because the conditions were not right to make it possible to do it. But I thought about that afterwards and thought, that's actually stayed with me in my body. There's an emotion that stayed in my body, which is a sort of what a waste of time. What a shame. And what did they think would be accomplished in a situation where there's lots of distractions and you can't focus? What actually is the point of that? What's the point of doing something but not really giving it proper attention? What's the point of that? And then for me, the whole question of, well, okay, I'm pretty clear in that situation. We need certain conditions, and if we don't have them, then we reschedule or not, if the person doesn't want to reschedule. So that's what we do. But that brought to mind, how many times in our lives do we find ourselves in a situation where somebody's shown up with "Oh, I thought this was just a pre-call" energy, or "Oh, I thought this was just a this or a that." And what they really mean is, "I thought this wasn't really important. I thought it didn't really matter. And so I didn't bother to set up the conditions right. I didn't bother to take care with my clothing or what I look like, or I didn't bother to brush my teeth. I didn't bother to make sure there's not screaming children in the background," whatever the situation might be, or "I didn't even bother to turn up on time." Or a while back, when I was in the process of trying to move house, I was having a lot of conversations with estate agents, and I picked up some of their jargon, and I turned up for a debrief with them about my property they were trying to sell. And they said, "So how are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I just met someone who's not proceedable." He said, "What do you mean you just met someone who's not proceedable?" Now, that's an estate agent term in the UK. Not proceedable to an estate agent in the UK means the person is not in a position to buy your property. They can't, either because they don't have the money, or they've got a property to sell and there's no sign of them selling it, or whatever the reasons might be. They're not proceedable. They're not in a position to be able to proceed. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I just turned up to meet someone for lunch, and he showed up 15 minutes late with almost empty petrol in his car and with no money to pay for his lunch." So, and this was supposed to be like a first date. It was someone I met at a friend's 70th birthday party, and or 60th, sorry, his 60th birthday party. And he was not proceedable as a potential partner or even as a friend. And so when I explained this to the estate agent, he thought this was very funny that I'd picked up that term. He was just not proceedable. So this lovely man I met this morning for the prequel was actually not proceedable for an episode. How often do we meet somebody in our lives who is not proceedable for whatever the thing is, whether it's a friendship, a relationship, a project, a work situation, a social project or community project or something? They're not proceedable. They don't have what it was required with them to actually be able to do it with you in that time. And how often do we compensate for that by bringing in our energy and going, oh, don't worry about it. I'll just focus really hard and try to kind of blank out the sounds of people ordering coffee and the woman on the other side of the room whose child is talking really loudly, or the couple behind you who are having some sort of very tense standoff at this point in time because he's probably having an affair. All the things that can be really distracting. We can decide that we're going to use our energy to override those, and we can feel clever and resourceful and resilient for doing that. But is that what we want to do with our energy? And also, this person who, in my case, thought it was just a prequel, do they really want to be there, actually? Do they really want to do this project, actually? Or do we cut our losses and move on and make space for the next person who is proceedable? And God knows, in my life, I have spent, in hindsight, much too much time in relationships and friendships with people who were not really proceedable, or where I was not really proceedable for them. That's the other side of it. Do we always show up in the right way to give the right attention to whatever the situation is? Or do we just fly by the seat of our pants and, like another person who turned up for a prequel, and I said, are you moving around? And why is the image? He said, yeah, he was walking around the kitchen holding in one hand the laptop, and in the other hand he was making smoothies for himself and his wife, because he was going to finish the prequel with me and then take the smoothies back to bed. So he was just not with me, and we didn't record together because he was not proceedable. So in your life, how are you managing this? Do you have clarity about what actually is needed for a situation to work? And do you stick to it? And are you gracious about it? Are you respectful? Are you kind? I like to think I am these days, respectful and kind and gracious with it. I know I haven't always been. And that's always an area where one can have more attention. That's the other thing. Do we show up in the right space, in the right conditions, etc., for the situation? And do we also have a little bit of energy in reserve to deal with supposing they don't? And can we be gracious and elegant in how we extricate ourselves? And are we also mindful about whether or not we give the feedback? Is this a situation where there is an investment? It is important that we give the feedback to the person in kindness, from a loving place. Or is it a situation where just let it go? Just let it go. It's fine. Just leave it. So all of these are judgment calls. They're all about sensitivity. And I think there's a part of us within us that we can actually nourish and strengthen by paying attention to these things and making sure that in our lives, by and large, we are spending time with people where we're both showing up in a way that works, and we're both comfortable and happy with that and relaxed with that. And that when that doesn't happen, there's a kind of damage limitation. We're moving on with grace and we learn from it. I've gone on to my booking system, and I've upgraded the introductory pieces of words for when someone's going to book a prequel. So it's much, much clearer now of exactly what I'm expecting in terms of their setup when they do that, which means when they see that, they've got the choice to say, no, it's not, I'm not prepared to do that. I will just be a guest on podcasts where they don't require a prequel. That's what I'll do. Absolutely fine. And then what do we do with the experience? I'm actually, I wasn't expecting to do this, but I've turned this experience into something to talk about on an episode, which I think is of value in general terms. Obviously, most of us are not podcasters, but most of us are doing things, creative things, projects with other people, even if it's only managing our relationships with our family. Are people showing up in the right way so that the events and the situations and the get-togethers and the gatherings are more likely to work out well because we put some thought into it and we prepared ourselves. We've shown up early. We've considered the environment. We've considered other factors, possible distractions, and things like that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I do really appreciate it, by the way, when people write reviews. And apparently what happens when you write reviews, which you can do on Apple, and I think you might be able to do on Spotify as well, it actually does a good thing for the algorithm, which means when people are searching for podcasts to listen to, they're more likely to be served up Truth and Transcendence. And that's great because obviously I want as many people as possible to benefit from this content that's going out. So if you feel like writing a review, even if it's just great podcast, I was so grateful and very much appreciate it. Have a beautiful day and a wonderful week. Bye for now, and I'll see you next time.